Hey guys, welcome back to New Digs.
We're here with Anita Da Fonte, and we're going to be talking to her about soil. Anita is a dear, longtime gardening friend. You are, I think, the first gardening friend I made when we moved to Connecticut.
Yeah.
So it's been a while.
And through Jill, I met Anita, and so now we have this little web of garden friends, and that was one of the things.
And chicken friends.
And chicken friends.
Chickens. We all love them.
Oh, and actually Anita she's the original mommy of my rooster, Lars, and I'm sure we will be able to put a picture of Lars. When Anita came to visit today, Lars actually sent a video since he could not be here himself. But Anita's main claim to fame, I guess, among other things, is that she's an extraordinary organic vegetable gardener, and she is so knowledgeable about soil. And so that's what we really wanted to talk about today.
And you guys really were like garden mentors when we first got here.
Yep.
We met Anita and her husband Vincent over 20 years ago, and they and their amazing garden have been such an inspiration to us over the years. They really took us under their wing and introduced us to other gardeners and showed us other gardens that would be inspirational to us as well.
And everything I know I've learned by doing. I mean, yes, I did work in the gardening industry for I've worked in it for 30 years on the publishing side, and for the past 10 years I've been working for Coast of Maine, and I discovered them
favorite products
because I used the product. So when they wanted to expand out of New England, I offered my services, and I've never looked back because I have access to great soil.
Let me just say that we aren't being sponsored by Coast of Maine. It just happens to be a product that we really like, and it happens to be where Anita works, and she's very proud of it.
Coast of Maine is actually the only soil product that we sell at my nursery. We don't sell any other brands, no, and people just go crazy for it.
I always say if you use the right soil, the plant's going to live and do really well, and new gardeners don't understand that, so they'll just buy soil and the plant will die and they'll blame themselves. So
Soil's everything.
Yeah.
Soil is everything. Soil is alive. I mean, that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. I mean, if you have a chance to look at the soil food web, you'll see what's going on beneath the surface.
So if you nurture the soil,
Absolutely.
the plant will do well. I mean, it's just...
When you say that the soil is alive, what does that mean?
It's teeming with biology. If you look under a microscope of like a native soil that's been stripped of everything, which a lot of soil, especially in the Northeast,
like here on
is
our
pretty
property.
much dead. There's nothing going on. And then if you start adding compost and manure and bringing it back to life, and you look under a microscope, you'll see tons of things going on.
Mycorrhizae and...
It's aerating, it's moving, it's, excreting little animals, making little insects, making room for those roots. The thing that a lot of people don't understand is you don't really feed the plant, you feed the soil. And by feeding the soil, you're helping your plant thrive.
The first year I was here, I didn't see a single earthworm, which was sort of a clue.
Right.
I was finding no little buggies, nothing. I did a soil test and it was just absolutely dead. The
Yep.
soil here is basically sand.
Yep. And that's the other key, is having your soil tested.
I was just going to say, what's involved in a soil test? Is that something complicated?
Pretty simple. You can buy a kit at a garden center. You can use your cooperative extension agency. I think they charge maybe $5. It's relatively simple to do. You just take soil samples from different spots in your yard. You send it in and they send you an analysis. Basically, the main thing you're looking for is the balance of pH. Because if your pH is too low,
It won't
plants
absorb nutrients.
won't absorb nutrients.
Okay.
Or if it's too high. So you're going to strive for like a neutral pH between like 6 and 6.5 is what
Perfect.
we think of as perfect, and balance all our soils at Coast of Maine to hit that level.
Just as a sidebar though, there are plants, and this is something that a garden center can tell you, that need a particular pH. So like acid-loving plants like blueberries,
Yeah.
for example,
Sure.
you're going to adjust the pH with
Correct.
other additives.
Yeah.
But we're talking about is just getting really beautiful, loamy, rich, composty soil as a,
Right.
a starting
Well,
point, and
that's
then you
why
can adjust.
here in Connecticut, in general, people need to add lime to their
Yeah.
lawns, for instance,
Right.
because you
So
know,
much clay has just
Yeah.
killed the soil.
And lime makes the pH more basic.
Yep. We
Um,
add lime to neutralize the pH because if you're adding, a lot of manures, which are great, I always recommend if you have access to good composted manure, just not horse manure. And I learned that the hard way.
Not horse manure.
Horse manure, horses don't digest their food, so when you use horse manure, it's introducing weed seeds.
that's probably why I have all those
Oh,
weeds.
yeah.
I collected a lot of dubious. We had this conversation.
Dubious compost.
No, it's
From-
true.
from the
I
dumpsters.
did it. We have the Governor's Horse Guard right down the street, and they always every year offer free composted horse manure. Big mistake.
And it looks beautiful when you
Oh,
get
yeah.
it, and
And
I've been
it's
weeding
terrible.
like crazy all summer.
Llamas and alpacas are the best. They
Okay.
have 5 stomachs. You can literally use their manure right away. It's not going to burn anything in your garden. It's the best. Chicken manure is fabulous, but it's too hot. So what we used to do is clean out the chicken coop in the fall, put it on the beds where we were going to grow eggplant because they're heavy feeders in the fall, and it would sit there all winter, and then in the spring we would turn it in.
And when you
So-
say hot, what does that mean? What
it's just got a lot of nitrogen, so it's
Okay.
gonna, it's not, you
It's gonna-
can't plant right in
It's
it.
gonna burn.
Right. And
the-
these
the
are just raw feedstocks. Like if you're buying if
Right.
you're a new gardener, your best bet is to buy a bag of compost like what Coast of Maine offers because we
Right.
take the guesswork out of it.
Right.
Because everything's aged the right amount.
Correct.
It's
Balanced.
been balanced. It's gotten to the right temperature that
So
you
there
know
are no
the
weed
weed
seeds.
seeds.
There's
aren't
no
gonna be
weed
there.
seeds, which I'm always looking
That's
to
huge.
eliminate work.
Yeah.
And cows are okay, but again, you have to let that manure compost for a few years before you use it in your garden. So if you have access to llama or alpaca,
That's a reason to get a llama or an alpaca.
alpaca. I always
Not that I
talked
need
about
one.
it.
Where are we gonna get our hands on a llama?
I don't know.
Oh, I remember when we first started our garden. There was a farm in Woodbury, and we were driving by and we saw it, and we stopped and we said, "Hey, do you think we could have some of your manure?" This was pre-Coast of Maine.
There is someone who has llamas here
Yeah.
in the south part of
This
town.
could be
I'm
a
going to have
visit.
to,
Yeah, it's
you know,
awesome, and
strike up a friendship.
absolutely, and it makes great compost tea. Also, we used to put it in a burlap sack, a natural one that wasn't treated, in a plastic garbage can. Make our compost tea, spot feed our plants. That's the other thing about building good soil. When you have really good soil, it holds moisture, so you're not a slave to watering.
Right. I mean, sand doesn't hold any
Exactly.
moisture. You need organic matter.
Yep.
So that's a huge part of
Yep.
what building soil is having enough organic matter in it.
Yeah.
Building organic matter is critical, and you just kind of have to think, you eat well, you get fresh air, you stay healthy.
Yeah.
Your plant is exactly the same thing, and its food source is the soil. So the more organic matter that you can add to your existing native soil, the healthier, the happier, the more fruit, the more flower.
And it holds on to the nutrients and the moisture and makes it
Absolutely.
available when the plant needs it.
Absolutely, that's
Well, that's the great thing about compost, though, is it will help. No matter what your soil problem is, it helps. If you've got sandy
Yep.
soil,
It's true.
it helps.
Yep.
If you've got clay soil, it helps.
Mhm.
No matter how bad your soil is, there's no problem that can't be solved with compost.
You're right.
It seems like.
it's the best. I mean, Coast of Maine started because we were looking for a way to help the fishing industry recycle their residuals. You know, the old
Ah.
Indian saying,
Yeah.
plant your fish heads in, that's great, but that also attracts raccoons. So you want to really use a product that's been composted. I'm not a big fan of adding raw ingredients into
Right
a
into the
garden.
bed.
But
Right.
if you compost something, it helps. And making your own compost is not that difficult. I spent 6 months in compost school learning how to make compost on a huge commercial scale, but I took away, some really good insight on ratios of green and brown, and anybody can make compost in their yard.
By green and brown, you mean
Leaves, grass clippings,
versus like wood.
and wood
So
shavings.
Green would be manures.
Yep.
It would be any green material from your yard.
As long as it's not treated with any chemicals.
Correct.
So like no grass clippings with grass.
Right,
food.
I mean organic.
Right.
Yeah, let's just for this conversation assume it's
Organic.
all organic.
Yep.
So manures, green materials from your yard, including grass clippings or trimmings from healthy plants. You
Yeah.
don't want to put anything diseased in your compost.
Correct. That if anything is diseased, you put it in a plastic bag and you get rid of it.
Right. And then
Yeah.
brown being anything carbon-based, like
Yeah.
leaves and
Wood shavings.
wood shavings.
But if you do use leaves, especially oak leaves, which we have a ton of here in Connecticut, it's best to run them over with your mulching mower or
Right.
get one of those leaf shredders because they take a long time to break down. So if you give them a little head start by chopping them up, they'll break down much quicker. And then it's just keeping it evenly moist, turning it occasionally. Home compost is wonderful to put in the bed, in the hole. I always say put that first and then put a coast of Maine compost on top because your home compost can never get hot enough to kill off the weed seeds.
Right.
So you want to put it where the light won't get it. So, weeds are just plants waiting
makes
to
perfect
germinate.
sense.
And if
Yeah.
they don't see light, they're not going to germinate. I'm always looking for ways to eliminate work.
I think that's great, especially like in a raised bed in your vegetables.
Yeah.
It's easy to have just the coast of Maine just be the top few inches.
That's
And
what
it
I
has
tell
the
people.
perfect
Yeah.
texture
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
for planting seeds directly in, as opposed to my homemade compost. It's a little bit chunky sometimes.
Yep, and then you don't have to guess when you're planting seeds. If when it germinates, it is seed or a weed. If you're
Right.
using,
Right.
I always recommend like a 2-inch layer of straight compost because ours can be used right out of the bag. It will keep the light away from your home compost, and then when the plant gets down to your own home compost,
It's full of nutrients.
it's got all that biology going on, and
Yeah.
it's saying, "Whoa!"
Right.
So it's going to grow all the root hair. The root hairs are the way the plant brings food in. The other
Okay.
thing I like to, remind everybody is when you're transplanting, be careful not to hurt the stem. Try to hold the plant by the tops or the bottoms because the stem is how it brings the food up to produce the fruit flower.
Right.
So the more roots you have, the stronger the fruiting and the flowering of your plant's going to be.
Interesting.
And it really does make a difference.
Sometimes customers will come into both the nursery where I am now and my previous one, and they'll say, okay, so I'll say, do you want some compost? Oh, just give me a bag of topsoil. Like, people have this
They
strange
don't know.
notion of that topsoil is the same thing as compost. And they also say, well, my grandfather always said, you have to put peat moss in the hole, too. And I say to them, well, how would you respond to that?
Topsoil is great for filling holes in a lawn, but that's about it.
For grass seeding.
For grass seed.
Exactly.
That's what its purpose is.
And when you get a bag of topsoil, there's nothing that's going to regulate what that is.
What it is.
Oh,
It's
no.
just soil off the top of
And
something.
if you
So
look
that could
under a
mean-
microscope, there's nothing going on there.
That can mean anything.
Yeah.
So whoever's filling a bag, they can call it topsoil.
Correct.
It could be just anything.
Yeah, it serves a purpose. It's great for filling holes.
Right.
But if you want a plant to survive and thrive, you have to build the organic matter. And
Basically,
it takes
it's
time.
not just a one and done. You want to
No.
add compost every
Every year.
oh yeah, that's I always recommend to people buy what you can afford and keep adding.
Yeah.
And seek out sources like a llama farm where you can get the manure, or even composted cow manure as long as you have a spot to let it rest. Even adding it to your home compost will help speed up
Right.
the process. Chicken manure, again, fabulous to add to your home compost to speed up the process
Right.
because it's very high in nitrogen.
Right.
And that's the other thing I like to, you see those 3 numbers on the
Numbers.
front of the bag, and that's, NPK. And how, layman's terms, up, down, all around. First
I
number's
love
for
that.
the greening up above the surface. The second number is for the root development, which leads to, like I said, more roots, the more fruiting and flowering.
Okay.
And the third number is all around plant health.
Interesting. Okay.
Depending on what stage of your plant's life, so when you first put it in the ground, you want something that has a high front and back number, the 1 and 2. And then when it's a little more established, you want to look for a higher middle number.
For vigor.
remember that organics are always very low.
Yes.
Like 0.01 or 0.02.
I was going to say that because sometimes
Yes.
there are products out there
Oh, yeah.
that'll have like a 50 as the middle number,
Exactly.
like 50. And people will say, oh, I'll
More's
just
better.
use this. Right. And it's not true because something that high, you really have to be careful
That
how
was
much
m-
of it you're using.
Right.
And
That was created in a lab
yeah,
by chemists, and
Right.
it's all synthetic,
yeah.
and it's
there
like
you go.
steroids for your body. If you're going to take, injections of steroids, you're going to get pumped up and you're going to excel at what you do.
As opposed
That's-
to eating well.
Exactly. That's what those
Ah.
high numbers do,
I
is
love
steroids for your plant.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to just have a Red Bull, you might have energy for
Exactly.
an hour, but if you eat well, you're going to
Yep.
have
Yeah.
energy for
Long term. I mean, if you look at lawns, a lot
Yeah.
of people strive for that beautiful green lawn, but come July or August when we haven't had a lot of rain, a synthetically fed lawn is going to look brown. Where if you have an organic lawn, it takes a few more years to get it established, but it's going to hold its
Yeah.
beautiful color.
because it'll be sinking its roots deeper.
Exactly.
And yeah,
Yep.
that's true.
It's very important. And the other thing is drainage. A lot of, I always say plants want to live. The ones that tend to die are the ones we overlove. And we overlove by overwatering. Plants don't need as much water as we think they do, especially ones
That's
in
true.
really good soil. You want to create strong root systems. Long season crops, like if you're a vegetable gardener, tomatoes, so you're going to plant them in, May, and they're going to be in the ground till maybe September or October. So you want to develop a strong root system. So I've learned over the years that you give them a lot of water less frequently.
Right.
People who water a little bit every day are training the roots
Right.
to grow along the surface, creating a weaker plant. So a wind could knock it down, or it will dry out much faster.
Yeah.
So building good soil and letting those roots dig deep. I mean, every tree, every shrub,
yeah.
every perennial, you want to create good soil.
A good healthy plant has as much going on under the ground as it has going on above the ground, which is sort of amazing. When you think about if you pulled all the roots from a plant out and sort of held it out in a straight line, if you made them all kind of
Yeah.
go, it just go on and on and on. But because it's sort of a web, it doesn't seem like very much, but it's
Fascinating.
It really
I
is.
mean, plant biology is amazing. I mean, and healthy plants tend to fight off pests and diseases.
Yeah.
So if you're
well, one of the things, good soil has a lot of mycorrhizae and,
Yep.
and fungi in it,
Yes.
and that is a benefit to the
Absolutely.
roots as well.
that's what that does, is develops those little root hairs. So the more of that you have, the better for the plant. And the cool thing about organics is the plant knows what it needs when it needs it.
Mm.
So it brings it in, and you're providing it by creating that wonderful environment for it. So you're going to get rewarded with lots of flowers, lots of fruit. It does work. You can't just, you can dig a hole and put a plant in, and it may, survive, but it's definitely not going to thrive.
Right.
It needs the organic matter.
Yeah.
And it's not that tough to do. I mean, it's just building it over time. I mean, you guys did it. You moved here and didn't know anything and created great soil. I mean,
Well, this house in particular, the soil, you've seen our native soil, it is
awful.
the worst.
Yeah.
That is why we've given up on the idea of lawn in the front, and we're starting to turn it into a meadow.
Yeah.
We added a ton of compost to the front, and it's basically sand and gravel, and it just ate that up, and it just,
Yeah.
So, sometimes you have to choose the right plant for the right place. And
Yeah. And one of the
But-
first things you advised me, I came here 2 years after Jill, you and your husband had moved here. And one of the first things I did at your advice was to get bulk compost. I got like 8 yards of compost from a local farm,
Right,
had it dumped. It was this giant pile.
right.
But over time, I just would wheelbarrow it into my garden.
Right.
I actually
and in the meantime, it was your nursery bed
That's
with all
right.
the plants that you brought up from the old house.
I wintered over a lot of
Yeah.
plants in that compost pile.
That's
And
what I
it's
did. I
Perfect,
brought- I
nice
brought-
and warm,
Yeah,
they're very
brought
happy.
plants from the old place. They sat in the nursery bed, and then as I started to build a garden for
Yeah.
them to go in, the compost could come with
There's
it.
so many worms,
They're great.
which is, and they create earthworm castings.
Yes.
Which is
it's
another,
fabulous.
I think Coast of Maine actually
make
sells
them,
it in a
yeah,
bag
yeah.
of earthworm castings. It's a super rich,
Oh,
beautiful.
it's the best. I top dress all
fertilizer.
my house plants before I put them away for the winter. I bring them in from outside, I give them new potting soil, and I top dress them with earthworm castings. They are so
Yeah, it's an amazing product. So, I
It
mean,
is.
all this stuff, just thinking about having great soil, like, I'm so glad that you made that recommendation to get bulk compost. And now what
Yeah.
I do is I top dress with, because now I can buy it in
Yeah,
bags.
yeah.
The existing soil is already great.
Exactly. It's
Yeah,
building
your soil
that
wasn't all that bad when
It
you
was
moved
not.
there, though. So
Because I have a lot of wooded areas and stuff. But yeah, it's not as bad as yours, but it definitely still needed a lot of amendment.
yeah,
And the other thing a lot of people don't realize is traditional bark mulches. You know, you see these
Yeah,
sales, 3 bags for $10. You get what you pay for.
Right.
Bark mulch is, I mean, it's a necessary evil because it does keep the weeds down. But if you have to use it, put compost down first, because what bark mulch does is it robs nitrogen from
Yes.
the soil. And it's not fair to the poor plants. So,
and I've known people who have cut down a tree, had all the wood chipped down. Oh, this is mulch. I'm going to put it right on the garden, and it of course kills everything, because
everything.
as it's breaking down,
yep.
it's pulling all the nitrogen
Nitrogen.
out of the soil that the plants need. And I have to admit, I made that mistake.
Oh yeah,
My first garden too.
we learn by doing. That's
right.
You learn by your mistakes. So, and you help others not
Right.
make them.
Right.
That's why we're all friends.
That's why we're here.
We're all here, and these guys are doing an amazing job with this education, and
Oh, thanks.
they are experts. I mean, both Jill and Melissa have gardens to die for.
They're getting there.
beautiful.
Let's put it
they're
that
on
way.
their way. It's a
Their
progress.
past gardens were amazing, and their current gardens in a very short period of time.
Well, we always
are
say
looking beautiful.
garden's a verb, not
Yeah.
just a noun.
It's true.
And if you all have seen our trailer, one of the things that we said is that gardeners are a generous bunch, and that one of our kind of creeds was that we wanted to share our friends and their knowledge, and this is a perfect example. And I think when we first thought of doing new digs, I think we had Anita
Right.
in our minds front and center, that she's exactly somebody that we'd like to bring in and talk to, and I think you can see why.
And I like to help. It makes me happy. Because I want gardeners, I want to cultivate gardeners. I don't want somebody to have a bad experience because they weren't educated properly.
Yeah.
Because then they're going to, like I said earlier, they're going to blame themselves, and
Right.
it wasn't their fault. If they had a good teacher, somebody to guide them in the beginning,
Yeah.
they
Well,
would
it's-
be successful, and
it's-
they'd want to grow more.
True, you don't want any. Let's face it, gardening takes some effort. There's a certain amount of digging and everything that you have
Right.
to do. So you know,
Right.
gardening requires effort. So last thing you want to do is take a new gardener and have them put the effort in and do it wrong
Right.
and fail and get discouraged and give up.
Right.
So if you're going to put the effort in, you want to put the effort in a smart way,
Yeah.
so
Right.
you succeed
Exactly.
Right.
and you get excited about it,
Right.
and then you want to learn
Do
more.
more,
And,
right.
Exactly.
and-
I mean, there's so many challenges. Last year was the perfect growing year. I mean, anybody who took up gardening, I always, there were millions of new pandemic gardeners that came in, and they did well because the weather was perfect, temperatures were perfect, everything grew. This year was a little bit more challenging. So you needed to look to experts for your help, because we had so much rain. We had roller coaster temperatures.
Yes.
Right.
100 degrees one day, 40 degrees the
Exactly.
next. I mean,
And you're not exaggerating. It really
no,
was.
it was
that
extreme.
June was less than half our normal rain, and July has been 4 times our normal rain, I think, so far.
Yeah.
So, it's been a little bit of a challenge this year.
Gardening is wonderful, and I always say gardeners are the best people because we rely on Mother Nature
Right.
for our livelihood and our success.
And gardeners are optimistic
Yep.
because everything you do is for the future.
Yep.
You
Mm.
plant a seed, and
Yeah.
that's the most optimistic thing you can do is plant a seed because
And how
This is-
bad can
this
a
is-
gardener be? They're taking a little seed and they're nurturing it
Yeah.
into this fabulous looking plant. It's
Yep.
awesome. Gardeners are the kindest, nicest people, and always willing to help. So
It's true.
it's so true, and I've been doing it a long time, and I see it.
And speaking of that, talk about helpful information. Anita, thank you so much. And
My pleasure.
we want to have you back on New Digs, and maybe when we do our compost
Ooh.
video.
I also do a lot of good cocktails from the garden. That's a good.
Oh, that's cocktails from the garden.
well next week.
That's right. Next week on New Digs. Well, so thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody, thanks again for joining us on New Digs. I'm sure that you got a lot of wonderful information today.
We'll see you soon.
See you next time. Bye.